Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about Colorado heading over to Lincoln to play a huge game this Saturday. I do have Nebraska getting that one by 6 points, but I think it could be a really, really fun up and down game, just very different styles on both sides of the ball on offense. But let's jump into Tennessee versus NC State because this is a very, very fun one over in Charlotte this weekend. Obviously, would love to see it in Raleigh. I don't know why it's in Charlotte, but at the end of the day, still going to be a very fun game, and I think it's one that a lot of people are looking at and saying it's going to be Tennessee. There's no two ways about it. What they did last week compared to what NC State did last week were two very different football teams. I'll just put it that way. But at the end of the day, I do think it's going to be incredible fun. And I think NC State's going to play much better football than they did in week one. And I think Tennessee might just take a small step back, although I think they might just be off to the races over there in Knoxville. But this is a really interesting game. This is about, Tennessee showing that they're real, showing that they're going to show up every single Saturday, and that they are part of a group that possibly can make the playoff. On the NC State side, it's kind of just washing that week one game away. They did win, but was very ugly in the process. So being able to get over that, and especially get a big time win over Tennessee, it would launch this season. It would get everything going for NC State and would put them in a position where they're walking into every single ACC game feeling very confident in their abilities to win. So that would be absolutely huge for them. And then the quarterback matchup is so much fun. You have a sixth-year guy in Grayson McCall, a very talented player, and then Nico making his only third start ever. So a very talented kid on the other side, but it's going to be so much fun to watch. Two very different styles of quarterbacks, but both incredibly talented. But moving on to the players to watch here, Chris Brazzell is a very talented wide receiver for Tennessee, and I think he's one of those players where Tennessee has so many guys on the outside. They have Squirrel White, they have him, they have Dante Thornton, they have many others. But at the end of the day, I think Chris Brazzell is an impossible cover. I don't think there's a corner in the country that can really guard him for entire 4 quarters. There are people that can do it pretty well. There is no one that can do it outright, and I don't think there's anyone in NC State that can do it all that well, if I'm being totally honest. So I think this is a guy that can kind of open up things. I think you have Squirrel White going downfield, you have Dante Thornton, you have all these other guys. Chris Brazzell might be the most complete of the group, and I think he could be a guy that just puts up crazy numbers this next weekend, or this upcoming weekend. Boo Carter is another guy I want to talk about, playing nickelback for Tennessee after Jordan Thomas went down. And you talk about this NC State passing attack. It's a lot of stuff over the middle of the field, whether it's crossers or it's to the tight end Justin Jolie, who we'll talk about here in a second. You have to be able to cover those guys. You have to be able to tackle strong, and particularly Jordan Waters, who I think is going to be used in this game a ton at the running back position. Making sure you are helpful in the run game is going to be huge for this. So Boo Carter is one of those guys, very young player, very talented, but needs to step up big in this game, that is for sure. Justin Jolie, as we just talked about, incredibly talented. One of those just matchup nightmares for NC State because 6'5", big-time tight end, but also can move like crazy. Is really fast, and one of those players that can totally just take over a game at the tight end position. So you would love to see a little bit more from some of the receivers on NC State than you saw a week ago. But at the end of the day, this is a guy that you can hang your hat on and feel pretty confident in. And then finally, Sean Brown. Sean Brown is taking over for that Peyton Wilson type role where you play linebacker, you play edge rusher, you kind of play around with a number of different things. He needs to be the guy. He needs to be the guy that shows up week in, week out. He needs to be huge in this game and then huge in pretty much every other big game that NC State plays. He is a big-time player, and especially with a young quarterback on the other side, if you can get home a couple of times, then you have him just a little bit rattled early on. How Tennessee can win this game is very simple, if I'm being totally honest. Come out swinging. This is a very potent offense. Throwing down the field is what they do, although the run game obviously predicates all of that. So it's obviously going to be run the ball early on. Definitely make sure you get that going. But at the end of the day, the kid you have under center is so special throwing the ball. It was kind of like what I was talking about in the last game. You want to make sure that this kid does not have training wheels on. You want to make sure that you don't shy away from his abilities because it's a bigger game, because it's so intense, because there's so much riding on this. You don't want to shy away from what Nico can do. let this kid throw the ball. Let him come out of the gates and be throwing the ball, feel really confident, get into a rhythm, and then it's going to be nearly impossible for NC State to stop him once he's in that rhythm. So this is about, run the ball efficiently, run fast, run multiple, but also get everything going in terms of the pass game. Make sure that you're getting it to all these special wide receivers on the outside and just getting Nico in a groove, because once you do, he's going to be like a boulder rolling downhill. And then be opportunistic on defense. This is not an NC State team that you are going to need to batter and beat to the. You're not going to have to tear them to pieces to beat this team. What you are going to need to do is get a turnover here and there. And they did not play clean football a week ago, put the ball on the ground 3 different times, didn't lose it once, but it was very ugly for a number of different times throughout that game, and they need to be able to possibly get a couple of those. And the other part of this is get home. Make sure that you are getting home in the pass rush and getting after Nico or getting after Grayson McCall, because then you're taking all of the energy out of that NC State offense. So be opportunistic on defense. Don't need to make all of the plays in the world, but at least make enough, especially on that back end, to make sure your team is in a great position going forward. And then James Pierce Jr., just give him a little bit of time. This goes back to that back end that is the biggest suspect part of this team. If you just give James Pierce Jr. and this entire defensive line really a little bit of time to get home, they're going to be able to. There's no two ways about that. So this comes down to them just playing a little bit of sticky coverage early on in that game and letting James Pierce Jr. get into it. He's going up against Anthony Belton for a lot of this game, a very talented, likely a first-round talent at offensive tackle. So it's going to be a really fun matchup. There's no doubt about that. But giving this guy time to work, giving this guy time to get to Grayson McCall is going to give you a ton of sacks in this game. And he's going to be able to be dominant, but he can't do that if the coverage on the back end is not great, or if NC State is getting the ball out quickly, which is actually one of the ways they can win this game. I think one of the big-time things for this game is obviously that pass rush, that defensive line for Tennessee against that offensive line for NC State. But at the end of the day, if you can hold them at bay, for just long enough to make sure that Grayson McCall can do a 3-step drop, get the ball out on a slant or a curl or a screen, and then let Kevin Concepcion and all of these incredible wide receivers go to work on the outside, you're going to have a way better shot. Kevin Concepcion is one of those guys that it doesn't matter who you're playing, it doesn't matter where you're lined up. He is a mismatch. If you get the ball in his hands as quickly as possible, it's going to be hard for Tennessee to stop him. Now, they're going to do a better job than a lot of the other teams in the past have been able to do, but they're not going to be able to do it perfectly. And I think that's going to be the big-time thing is you have so many weapons with Concepcion and Rogers and Jolie. Get the ball out quickly, let this pass rush not get their feet set, and then you might just be running off on offense and putting up quite a few points on this team. Jordan Waters is also a very important player in this game. You look at last week and you see the numbers, 20 carries, 124 yards. It looks really good. He had a 50-yard touchdown at the very end of that game to make it look a lot better than it was. He had 19 carries, 74 yards before that, 3.8 yards per carry. He needs to be better than that in this game. NC State cannot go into this game without a run game and expect to walk out with a win. Now, that's much easier said than done with the Tennessee defensive line on the other side, but Jordan Waters is an outright difference maker. He's a guy that can run through contact. He's a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield and do so many different things, and particularly the NC State offense is run first and then play action. That's what they do. That's the way they're going to go about business. You can't do that if Jordan Waters is taken out of this game. So need to get him the ball early and need to make sure that he at least gets his feet under him a little bit better than it was in week 1. And then you got to rattle Nico early. This is a very young quarterback. I understand what he did last week was absolutely insane, and I'm kind of getting a little taken away with it myself. But at the end of the day, this is still a very young kid, still making his third start in college football and going up against a team that is very smart, very veteran, a good group. Now, the defense leaves a little bit to be desired, no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, you can still get at this kid. You can still cause problems for him, and you can still make it so he does not feel comfortable that entire game. So it's really about coming out of the gate, making sure that he knows he is that defense is felt by Nico Iamaleava early on in this game, and then you have a lot of possible mistakes that could come your way. If they don't come your way, then we're having a very interesting conversation about Nico this upcoming Monday about possibly him winning the Heisman. But at the end of the day, a couple of matchups to watch on Saturday. We talked about it, the Tennessee defensive line against the NC State O-line likely will decide this game. I think Tennessee has a really solid, deep defensive line, especially on the interior, but the edge rushers obviously are special with Pierce Jr. and all those guys, but if NC State can hold their own, they don't have to be perfect, because likely they won't be. This is too good of a group to hold them at bay the entire day, but if you can use the short passing game, if you can hold them at bay for just long enough to make sure that this offense keeps moving, you're going to be in good shape. And then you got to open a couple of run gaps, but if you can do what they plan to do in the pass game, then those gaps will open pretty much automatically. And then the NC State wide receivers against the Tennessee DBs is one of the areas of this game that NC State can really take advantage. Their wide receivers are so talented. They're so multiple. They have so many guys out there, and tight ends as well with Justin Jolie. But the Tennessee back end is questionable as of right now. A good group, a very talented group, but still kind of finding their groove. And I think it's one of those things where NC State does not have a lot of advantages in this game. That's just the plain truth. But if you can get those playmakers out on the outside quickly and make sure you can take advantage of the one weakness of this Tennessee defense that you do have, you might just have a shot, and you might just put yourself in a position where you're playing this game deep into the fourth quarter with just a couple of plays that need to be made on either side of the ball. So I think it's about just getting these wide receivers running forward at this Tennessee secondary, because if that happens, they are very hard to stop, especially Kevin Concepcion. And then finally, Nico against this DC is going to be fascinating. Tony Gibson is a very good play caller, someone that maybe doesn't have the personnel that he would love to have, but still has done a number of really good things in the past. And again, a very young quarterback walking into this thing. If you can get after him, if you can confuse him with coverages, if you can do a lot of the things that they very much want to do in this game, you might just get a mistake. Now, we don't really know what Nico is fully yet, so maybe you won't. Maybe he'll just rip you to pieces regardless, but there is a reality where a young player walks into this game with a ton of confidence, and then the defensive coordinator just outdoes him and confuses him and makes it really tough for him to execute. So that would be kind of the only way that North Carolina State could go about this one, is making sure that they get a couple of mistakes from the young kid, but I don't think they're going to get them. I think this one's a blowout. I'll be totally honest. I think Tennessee is rolling off that game, and I understand it was UT Chattanooga. That works against any defense in the country. The balls that he was putting on and the way that he was putting it in those windows, there was no one in the world that could stop what they were doing. It was incredible to watch this team go to work last week. And NC State, while I think they're a very good team, and I don't think this is going to torpedo their season by any means, they have too much to fix from a week ago. To play a team that is so ready to go like Tennessee is, there's too much to overhaul over there at NC State, at least in the short term. I think they will be a contender in the ACC long term, but as of right now, I think Tennessee's just too much for this team. So I do have Nico getting that big-time win, maybe starting a Heisman campaign that we might just talk about a little bit later in the show. But let's take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple more games. I'll give you predictions for 3 big-time games: South Carolina at Kentucky, we have California heading over to Auburn to play a game, and then Kansas at Illinois is the other one I want to talk to you about. So we'll break those down right after this, so stick with us.